Hello, welcome to this podcast. I'm Sandra Feuell, Insurance Development Manager at the Right Mortgage and Protection Network. Today I am joined by Phil Jeynes, Head of Individual Protection at MetLife UK. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Sandra.
Nice to meet you. Thank you
Likewise.
for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, the protection market has been through a lot of scrutiny in recent years. From your perspective, how has the protection market review changed the way advisors and providers approach protection conversations?
I think, we've had a lot of scrutiny since the FCA announced their market study a year or two back. Actually, what's been really heartening, I think, is the interim report of that study has not found any massive issues that the FCA feel they need to address in our market. In fact, most of the report, it talks quite positively about the market. So I think that's really great for all of the advisors and distributors and insurers in the market to take some heart from. I think the key thing is that focus on making sure we're continuing to offer fair value to all of our customers, however we're delivering that protection proposition to them. So what I've seen over the last year or so is really firms introspecting a great deal about their processes and procedures and making sure that they're confident that the protection offering that they're giving to customers is still the right way to be approaching things. So I think that's been really, as I say, a really positive outcome of that study is that everyone's had a really thorough look at what they're doing for protection and making sure that they're maximizing those opportunities. And the biggest thing that the FCA points to is that there aren't enough people buying protection, which I think everyone in the market accepts. Everybody is working really hard to try and close that, cliched protection gap that we all talk about. And this has given us a renewed emphasis to do that.
Excellent. So we often talk about the importance of a full protection package. Why is it so important that advisors look beyond life insurance alone and consider accident and sickness alongside income protection and critical illness cover?
It's a really good question. I think the instinct for a lot of advisors to start with life insurance is mainly because that's such a good product and it's really applicable to most customers, particularly mortgage customers, because they're taking on this, probably the largest debt they're ever going to have in their lives. And if there's more than one party involved in that mortgage, and all there are dependents involved, then that catastrophic event of someone dying early, has a huge financial impact. So it's a great product meeting a really obvious need. The other thing that really goes in life insurance's favor is it's one of those products that customers understand. It's one of these fantastic products that kind of does it does the opposite of what it says in the tin, because it should be called death insurance, I suppose. But you get the point. Customers instinctively understand what it is. It's part of the natural, the national consciousness, life insurance. So it's a kind of easy conversation to open up, even though it's an uncomfortable subject. The downside with life insurance, thankfully, is that most people never claim on it, certainly during the lifetime of their mortgage. So most people, thankfully, live to a reasonably long and ripe old age, and will have had the peace of mind and the comfort of that life insurance protecting mortgage debt, but never have to call upon it, thankfully. What's much more likely is that they're going to have some bumps in terms of health along the way, and that could be a serious illness for which critical illness and serious illness cover is really appropriate for, or even more likely it could be an injury. So the important thing is to discuss all of these eventualities with your customers and make sure that they've considered protection from the very basic, like MetLife covers, broken bones and visits to hospital, right through to the extreme end of the spectrum that, cover for if somebody in the mortgage arrangement dies.
Thank you. I'm a huge advocate of this because people forget that actually their biggest asset is their income. And there's
Absolutely.
so many things that can stop them earning that income, and an accident is the most likely.
And the more, I think there's a huge, growing sections of society whose way of earning income is different to what it was historically. So the number of people who are in the gig economy, delivery drivers, those sorts of people, 0 hours contracts. There's a huge number of people who don't have sick pay, or have sick pay that doesn't last for very long. So for those people, I always use the example of when my kids were at school, like we got that phone call saying you need to come and pick your son up, and and
Yeah.
and and he'd fallen over at break time, and as it turns out, he'd broken his collarbone. So he was right as rain within a few weeks. Kids bounce back from these things. And both my wife and I worked in occupations where I was working from home, so that I could just down tools for a couple of hours and take him to A&E. My wife was working in a school, so she had sick pay and flexibility there to be covered by her colleagues. So, but if we were in a situation where one or both of us were on 0 hours contracts, or working in the gig economy as delivery drivers, and you can't just down tools, A, you're losing income. B, you've then got a bunch of added expenses because we all know what it costs just to park at a hospital for a few hours.
Yes. Yes.
Then you've got the additional expense of, well, now we've got to buy him a McDonald's on the way home and all the rest of it. These sorts of little things, which sound kind of inconsequential, but for a huge section of society, they're massive. And
Yes.
it doesn't take an enormous amount of imagination to say, well, what if that was a slightly more serious accident and he'd had to stay in hospital and one of us had to stay with him, and all those sorts of things. So cover for those more mundane things is really, really important to the cover to discuss with customers. It's really affordable, and we're not saying do this instead of life insurance. We're saying
Yes.
whilst you're looking at the big picture stuff, look at some of the small picture stuff at the same time.
Exactly. So at MetLife, you often refer to the protection puzzle.
Yeah,
Can
and
you explain what that means and
yeah,
how advisors can use it?
that's pretty much what I was just talking about. It's the kind of the visual analogy we use for when you're looking at providing that protection package for your customers. Think of it like a puzzle. You've got all these different pieces that you fit together, and together they form a whole which is perfect protection for your
Mm,
customer. So as I say, in the top left hand corner, you might have that puzzle piece that says, well, what if one of you dies? Very unlikely, but if it happens, it's an absolutely enormous event, and the financial consequences are dire. So really important we look at that. But then there's these other puzzle pieces, as you said, Sandra. There's what happens if you're unable to work for a period of time, be that illness or injury. What happens if one of your kids has to go into hospital for a short stay and you have to take time off work? These
mm,
are all the different puzzle pieces that if you discuss them with your customer, you can put them all together in the right way and come up with a package that makes sense. In an ideal world, the customer takes every puzzle piece. In the real world, you know, we'll
yes,
start to have that conversation about how we fit it to your budget and which parts are more important than the others.
exactly. So the current market is putting real pressure on mortgage advisors.
Mm.
What is it about MetLife's products, particularly Mortgage Safe, that makes them easy to integrate into the mortgage advice process and helps advisors continue having effective protection conversations with clients?
It's a good question. I think we're always, listen, I started out my career many years ago as a mortgage broker. So I still remember, the stresses and strains of that role. And mortgage brokers quite often get a bit of a hard time for not selling enough protection and, not
Yeah.
protecting enough mortgages. But I think we've got to be realistic again in that, the core reason that customers come to mortgage brokers is exactly that. They want the mortgage, they need the remortgage onto the better terms, or they need the house purchase to go through. So that's the need that the mortgage broker is serving first and foremost. Now, we're all massive believers that alongside that, you should do a proper protection job so that they get to stay in that house or they get to, keep paying the mortgage. But we've got to be realistic. So the products that MetLife have designed are all incredibly simple, straightforward to explain to customers. So you're not having to open up these complex and convoluted conversations with your clients around protection products. You can talk about products that have for a large part, little to no underwriting, guaranteed acceptance, with straightforward pricing that's really affordable. Mortgage Safe, in particular, as the name suggests, was designed specifically to protect mortgage debt. It's got very little underwriting. In fact, there's a no underwriting option. So most customers can take it without any questions. and can be put in place immediately.
Excellent. So something that they can obtain quickly if they don't want to go down that long underwriting process.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Quick, easy, affordable. That's what we try and make all the MetLife products.
Excellent. So finally, with the current mortgage market being as challenging as it is, I think you have already touched on it just now, but how is MetLife supporting advisors to write more protection? And why is
What
that
we
support more important than ever?
Sorry, Sandra, didn't
Yeah, that's all
interrupt.
right.
Um, I think what we try and do is start with the need rather than with the product. So
Mm,
we've got a great team of account executives and strategic account managers that are on the phones in our office in Brighton or out in the field across the country. And what they do is support mortgage brokers and other types of advisors with their protection conversations. They don't start by telling you solely about MetLife products. They'll talk about opening up those protection conversations, putting into place those pieces of the protection puzzle that we spoke about earlier.
yeah,
And if we can then introduce ways that the MetLife products can help piece that puzzle together, then great. But what we're all about is supporting advisors to have those conversations. We've got a ton of resource on the website, which again you can get through your account executives or directly from the website that support those conversations. So lots of visual tools and aids that just make the job much easier.
excellent. Thank you for joining me today, Phil.
It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you for highlighting how MetLife products support a comprehensive protection recommendation.
You're welcome. And any advisors out there that want to speak to any member of my team, then please get in touch. You can find all the details on the website.
Thank you.